Well, it looks like Donald Trump's days as the 45th president of the United States are now finally numbered. After weeks of fierce resistance, Trump has told officials to cooperate in the transition of power to President-elect Joe Biden. But he apparently remains determined to make life as difficult as possible for his successor. While Biden has been working on the final details of his new government team, Trump has been issuing warnings to Iran and preparing to order a far-reaching troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. On to the point we therefore ask, Trump's last days in office, lame duck or raging bull? Well, thanks very much indeed for joining us. And my guests here in the studio are Susanne Koelbl, foreign correspondent for Spiegel magazine, who says Trump has had a devastating impact on America's standing as a reliable global leader. The old America no longer exists. Also with us, Erik Kirschbaum, a freelance journalist who writes for the LA Times and says Trump's power is fading by the day, but his failure to ensure a smooth transition to Biden has become a real threat to national security. And a very warm welcome too to Fathollah-Nejad, a German-Iranian political scientist with the Afro-Middle East Center in Johannesburg. And Ali argues that overt military adventurism against Iranian interests may prove too costly, even for Donald Trump, so covert operations are more likely. Yeah, thank you all three for being here today. First question, Erik. Donald Trump's former National Security Advisor John Bolton says the big question is how much damage Trump can still do before the January the 20th inauguration. And you think he might do quite a bit of damage.
I thought the biggest threat to national security was not giving Biden's team the secret, the intelligence reports that need to be given to the new president and not cooperating with the new team. That's a risk here in this interim period of the incoming president not being up to speed. This is something Obama did for Trump. This is something that Bush did for Obama. It's something that's always done in America. We've never seen a situation like this where the president is not cooperating with the incoming team. That's hopefully going to be changing now. We've seen some small developments this week, and hopefully that'll get better. That's the big problem for national security.
Susanna, what do you say on that question about the threat to national security?
The threat of national security is most likely, as Mr. Kirschbaum just laid out, bad. What he still can do is damage to countries where the Americans have a big leverage and a huge impact, like, for instance, in Afghanistan, like, for instance, I heard that he still tries to convince Pakistan to give up their resistance against Israel. So he still does whatever he can to leave his heritage, and that Biden has to deal with it.
What do the...
Well, I think he's also, I mean, trying to address two constituents or two circles of friends or supporters. One is the regional allies of Trump, Israel, Saudi Arabia, most notably, who fear that with the Biden presidency there might be another Iran policy and which would, tremendously decrease the pressure on Iran. So they're trying to, figure something out to do in this interim period. Another one is appealing to a social constituency in the United States. When it comes to the troop withdrawal in Afghanistan, so this is going to go down well with them. So, but at the end of the day, we're going to see which of those developments is going to materialize or not.
Erik?
Yeah, I mean, Trump has promised his voters he's going to bring the soldiers back home. He's going to end these endless wars. And he's wanted to do more in Afghanistan all along. He had to fire his last defense minister a week or two ago who didn't want to withdraw the troops. This is something that Trump supporters want. This is something a lot of American veterans want. I think 20 million Americans have served in these last wars, the last 2 decades, and there's a strong sentiment, hey, we lost, there's no point, let's get out of there.
Just tell me again about the perspective of the people of Iran. Can you generalize about, which direction they lean in, Biden or Trump?
Well, this is there is a controversy in Iran, I think. Of course, Trump doesn't have any kind of fans or supporters among Iranians because of its anti-democratic credentials. So people do not have any illusions that this is a kind of democratic president they can rely upon and pin their hopes on. But there is a controversy among Iranians. One side says that actually the maximum pressure strategy with the economic sanctions on the regime has been quite important because it has been weakening the regime. So this is something that a lot of Iranians who are critical of the regime would welcome. On the other hand, and in this way, actually, they fear that Biden might opt for an appeasement, a quasi-appeasement policy on Iran, when sanctions would be eased and cash would return to the leadership in Iran. On the other hand, there are others who argue that state-society power relations have developed negatively, and because with the sanctions also civil society is actually weakened. And I think this controversy is going to continue.
Susanna, you are feverishly writing down notes.
I mean, when it comes to Iran, obviously, I mean, the people of Iran, they don't mind whether the situation they are living in will be changed by a new uprising or by negotiations or anything. They need to have something changed in their country. I mean, the question
now is that they need something changed, and this is for many parts of the world. So what role can America play in this? What is going to change with Joe Biden and his now newly announced team coming into office?
Well, Biden has sent signals that he wants to return to the deal. Who knows? There's an election coming up in Iran. But one thing I'd like to say about Iran that's important not to forget is Hezbollah, 4 years ago, was a real problem. Hezbollah has been starved of resources now because of the sanctions. The sanctions that are perhaps popular among ordinary Iranians are also reducing terrorism, the threat of terrorism, thanks to what Trump did there.
That's only one of the effects. Actually, really, I mean, let's be fair. Hezbollah also has a problem because you have it's a crisis in Lebanon which actually brought everything down, and also Hezbollah, and they are just a part of that society. Certainly, the resources are cut back. Iran doesn't have the money to be active everywhere. They are in Yemen, they are in Syria, they are in Lebanon. But at the end of the day, it's a combination of a couple of things. So it didn't work out 100%. I wouldn't like to say that.
OK, let's just rewind for a moment. The incumbent president of the United States of America is still Donald Trump, and it seems that he is slowly accepting that he can't stay in the White House indefinitely. So the question is, will it be by the front door or by the back door that he leaves? And will it be with a bang or a whimper?
Donald Trump has half-heartedly and indirectly admitted defeat on Twitter 4 weeks after the election. But the incumbent president remains in a sullen mood. Judicial challenges to the election result have no prospects of success. Trump is only half-heartedly completing mandatory tasks, such as the virtual G20 summit. After a while, he cut the signal and went to play golf. He seems to be spending more time at the golf course than the White House. In one of his few public appearances, Trump seemed so uninspired that even his personal broadcaster Fox News ended the live broadcast. It is getting lonely for the most powerful man in the world. Has Donald Trump given up?
That still is the question. Has he given up? He's got another couple of weeks to work with. What should we expect from those couple of weeks? I mean, he looked at the G20 very washed out, but we have the impression that he still has a lot of sort of dark intent.
Well, I mean, he's certainly struggling as someone, as I alluded to earlier, who doesn't believe really in democratic institutions and processes. So he had a tough time. And now, I think he's, trying to prepare or to satisfy his supporters domestically and internationally by some of the moves that we're talking about. But we have to see whether all those moves gonna materialize, and this is also probably in view of his real, eventual or probable or unlikely whatever rerun in 2024. So to keep the support of regional allies and also to keep the support of the social constituencies that he has in the country.
When you talk about moves being made, you're talking, I assume, about diplomacy. And I'm just wondering, Susanna, you indicated at the top of the show in your statement that the old America is no longer the America that was there. Yeah, it's a different America now. Are you talking there about diplomacy? Has America lost its
I think it's both. America has, first of all, lost its credibility. People don't know what to expect from this America any longer. And secondly, suddenly Trump left a mark which will not go unnoticed for the next years and decades. So he has really changed the face of America, and America has changed its focus. I mean, the Middle East and Europe is not their first priority any longer. So this has begun already in the times.
China.
Yes, it has. So the Indo-Pacific area or region is actually their focus on now, and we have to live with the repercussions. And Trump was just an extreme. An extreme way to present this to us.
And Joe Biden says America is back. What does it mean? Where does he get the confidence from?
Well, I wouldn't be as gloomy and depressed as the others here. I mean, I think the United States is a leader, will be a leader, and I think that's one of the reasons Biden wanted to run for president. He wanted to help restore the United States tradition, the reputation the United States has as being a leader. And he likes working with alliances. He likes working with partners. He gave a very important speech last year at the Munich Security Conference talking about alliances. And I think Biden will be a lot like previous American Republican and Democratic presidents. Yeah. I think Trump will be the aberration when we look back at this period in history.
Diplomacy is back, says Biden.
Definitely. I mean, look at his choice for foreign Secretary of State. I mean, this is somebody who's lived a lot of his life in Europe and realizes the importance and the values. Realizes the values of these relations and alliances, and Biden says himself, the United States is stronger with its partners. This is a new sound, a new tone coming from Washington. I think the last 4 years have hardened a lot of people in Europe. They think horrible things about the United States, but it worked. The institutions worked, democracy worked, and now we have a new president after just 4 years of Donald Trump.
A major rebuilding job has just begun. It's already underway. Ta-ra, ta-ra. Do you buy into it?
Well, I mean, as much as, Trump tried to reverse everything Obama did, Biden is going to do the same when it comes to Trump's policies. Yet we're not going to see a sea change on all conceivable levels. Some of the things that Trump did were preceding him. The disagreements over the role of European partners in NATO, the issue with China, and also, I mean, it's true that Biden has decades of, experience in the foreign policy establishment, but realities in the ground in the Middle East have dramatically changed since a decade ago. Mm-hmm. We have entered a process where, some people call it a long-term revolutionary process, where there's a lot of, dissatisfaction, uprisings all over the place. So there are changing realities on the ground. And there are probably also different expectations from the United States. So the challenges are extreme, but surely he can mend transatlantic relations. There is also an appetite for that here in Europe.
Yeah. OK, when you talk about changes on the ground, the part of the world we're talking about is the one that goes from the Middle East through Iran right over to Afghanistan. Donald Trump has had quite an impact there. Let's have a look at where things stand for the time being, and then we'll talk more about those revolutionary pushes.
In Afghanistan and Iraq, the old president is creating facts before the new one is sworn in. Trump will withdraw 2,000 U.S. soldiers from Hindu Kush alone by mid-January. U.S. allies are outraged because without American air support, their deployments on the ground could become suicide missions. The Taliban could regain power, and Afghanistan could once again become a haven of terrorism. But Trump's policies have many supporters in the rich countries of the Middle East. Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates have established diplomatic relations with Israel with the help of U.S. mediation. Saudi Arabia may be the next to do so. The Palestinians and their interests, however, have been completely ignored by Trump. Trump's hostility towards Iran is legendary. After he terminated the Iran nuclear deal, sanctions and threats against Tehran followed. Even an airstrike on Iran under Trump cannot be ruled out. Will Trump's foreign policy become a security risk in the final days of his term in office?
Susanna, is there a Biden doctrine?
As far as I can see, there is a doctrine that he wants to heal the wounds that Trump has created. The doctrine is certainly to reunite with the allies, but the U.S. is not an altruistic country. It's a country driven by interests. Mm-hmm. So finally, what we see is a nicer approach. But
good intentions.
Good intentions.
Good intentions are back.
Good intentions are back, which is a good thing, which is a great thing. And at the same time, the interests will stay the same. I mean, there is much more room for negotiations now, which is wonderful. And people who know their job and have their expertise are obviously having an opportunity to be heard, which has not been the case in the last 4 years, or only very rarely has been the case. So I think that's definitely a doctrine. But what we will see is not the America that we have seen 5 years ago, or which we have known 5 years ago under Obama.
Obama's America, yeah. Tell me about the mood on the streets in Iran, and how that, this would-be new diplomatic approach on high, and the people down on the streets getting more and more angry and impoverished in Iran. How does that knit together?
Well, I think, first of all, it's important to point out how the Iranian leadership also thinks about this question. And they've been fearing the ramifications of Trump's maximum pressure strategy because of the economic sanctions that were quite onerous on the regime. Hence, there was a lot of hopes pinned on the Biden administration. So from the leadership side, it's quite clear. From the societal level, as I've alluded to earlier, there are different estimations on the benefits of sanctions, and some sections might be in favor of sanctions, but there are other important sections of the population in Iran who fear the ramifications of economic sanctions on the general population. But be it as it may, the general feeling for a few years now, at least in Iran, is that they identify the policies of their own government to be the most important factor in their own fate and for their own future.
Observation.
So foreign forces, although they have a very important impact upon Iran, be it by action or by inaction, be it the United States or Europe, will have a continuing impact, but there are no more, let's say, there are no more illusions that there is a foreign savior, although the domestic situation in Iran that is also not really, filled with hope, pushes some people to think about a foreign savior. But I think also Trump didn't prove to be, aiding Iranian democracy.
Yeah. Erik, so the Biden administration is promising to take a radically different approach. And when I just wonder, I'd like to take, something like the American assurance that, or recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Is that the kind of policy that Joe Biden might reverse? Where are we expecting reverses?
No, I don't think America will change their policy with the embassy in Jerusalem and the recognition of the capital. Trump is hugely popular in Israel. He's been very pro-Israel from the beginning, as we saw. Another thing he's done in the Middle East that's important, that's also written about in the U.S. press a lot, is the peace with UAE and possibly Saudi Arabia. This is something that's getting a lot of attention, or got a lot of attention in the U.S. Also from liberal columnists who were praising Trump, saying in other times he'd be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And I know in Germany, Trump is not that popular, and I was really interested to see that the media hardly wrote about that. But there were
quite a few liberal journalists here in Germany as well.
Yeah, but in Germany, if that had been Obama, it would have been a lot different story, I think. So you see how unfair sometimes the media is towards Trump, especially in Europe, and that was a pretty big, important breakthrough. And I think that's a legacy that Trump will be remembered for, the breakthrough with UAE and Saudi Arabia.
Well, I would be actually more cautious because what actually happened under Trump's watch is an officializing of some of America's policies and realities in the region that were there, you know. So there was cooperation between all those states, more covertly than overtly, and now it is officialized. Plus the fact that none of those regimes are, democratic. They're, very authoritarian regimes, and they, by no account, can, represent the Arab populations and their aspirations in the region. So, so this is not a positive development per se. That there is now a, peace deal between Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE and Israel. This is not something, that is going to lead necessarily to a positive development for the region and also to positive outcomes for the populations of the region. So there is a lot of, euphoria about what was happening, although I think much of that euphoria is misleading.
It's also not the end of the story, I would say. I mean, for instance, you can befriend the UAE, but at the end of the day, the problem is not solved with the Palestinians. So you cannot ignore it. I mean, you cannot put it to the history books and say solved. No, it's not solved. I mean, the Palestinian issue is still there. It's considered as failed now. I mean, and you have huge frustrations in the Palestinian communities. And just look to Jordan, for instance. I mean, they have taken like millions of Palestinians, and where shall they go? Actually, they just leave the problem in the region and give it back to people who can deal with it. And that's not what a world power or a superpower should do. They should actually try to balance, and they should try to heal what this story of in the history has done to those people of the Palestinians, for instance.
A general question, because we don't have much time, and I'm just interested in the sort of the philosophy of all this. Biden has said he won't just try to repair diplomacy; he'll try to reimagine diplomacy. That, I thought, was an interesting juncture in his foreign policy address just a couple of days ago. But what does that mean, reimagine diplomacy? Who's the quickest?
As much as I think that what Trump did with all those states in the region is a PR stunt, the same could be applied to what you just quoted from Biden. I mean, it would be very desirable if the United States would go for some creative diplomacy in some of the very difficult spots of your theaters of conflict in the region. But I'm actually not sure what he's really meaning by that.
What might it mean in concrete terms as far as relations between Washington and NATO and Europe and Germany go?
With NATO, I think it's pretty clear. I think the United States, under Biden, just like under Trump and Obama, wants Germany and the NATO allies in Europe to do more for their own security. I think that's very clear. All the comments we've seen have been clear that Germany needs to do more. Some parties in Germany want to do more, some don't. But this idea about reimagining diplomacy, I mean, Biden's main challenge, and something he's talking about, aside from climate, is COVID-19. And I think that's going to be his #1 priority. And I think he'd like to see the world working together. Maybe that's what he's talking about, seeing countries working together, as we're seeing with the vaccines that are coming out. These are cooperations taking place. That's probably where Biden is hoping for the biggest breakthroughs as quickly as possible with the coronavirus.
I mean, if you want to reinvent diplomacy, you should not talk to one side only. I mean, if we spoke about this huge success, which is a success, that you normalize relations with Israel, but if you actually build an alliance against a common enemy, and this is actually the target of this, and this is the only thing everybody can agree on, that's not really a diplomacy which is very fruitful in the end.
Is it naive? Is Joe Biden naive here?
No, he's certainly not naive, and he has to deal with that. I mean, it's progress in some way, but you also have to address the other issues which have not been addressed by Trump. He just tried to dry out and to suffocate Iran, which is actually quite unlikely that it really succeeds.
Trump's last days in office, lame duck or raging bull? That was the question we asked at the beginning of the show. What's your answer, Ali? Lame duck or raging bull?
Well, I think there's no easy answer to this, and I don't know what is going to happen. But we're going to see some acts that might be symbolic, and that he wants to address, his supporters hitherto, and he wants to guarantee that they will continue to do so in the next few years.
Lame duck or raging bull?
I think it'll be more and more lame duck. He'll be playing more golf, and he'll keep pardoning prisoners and people who've helped him. But I think playing golf is actually a good thing. The more he plays golf, the less damage he can perhaps do.
The final word?
I hope as well that he can improve his handicap, but at the same time we will see more Trumps to come.
More Trumps to come. Thank you very much for joining us here on To The Point this week. That's an interesting place to finish. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. If we have, goodbye and cheers. Come back next time.